Travis Fowler, Hark Rider, Four Corner Post, bringing you this week's edition of Best Wrestling Show of the Week. And honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of standouts, although there was one standout match, I think, for this entire week, which we'll get to in a little bit. But let's go ahead and get started. The first show I'm going to talk about, which was my least favorite show, was Monday Night Raw. They built it basically around the idea of the tag team unification titles, which I still am a big proponent for, and that would of course play into SmackDown later this week. RK Bro came out and announced that they were going to head over to SmackDown to challenge the Usos for that tag team unification title match, which I'm all for that. I still think that's a great idea, but again, it was just to build towards that announcement on SmackDown. That was also then followed up by a Judgment Day promo with Edge, Rhea Ripley, and Damian Priest explaining what their goal is to do, I guess, so to speak, which led into Rhea Ripley having a match with Liv Morgan and ultimately defeating Liv, and then that led into Damian Priest taking on Finn Balor yet again, but this time Styles was with him at ringside. I think this is going to lead to Edge and Priest taking on Styles and Balor in some form of a tag team match. We'll see if that's exactly where it goes. I have a feeling that's where it's going to go, so that might actually be something that ends up being pretty fun. Then we led into the main event segments, which was going into Rollins and Rhodes yet again, and I don't really have a problem with this feud continuing. Matter of fact, I kind of didn't like the way they finished the match at Backlash because Rhodes cheated to win, and he's trying to be built up as a huge babyface, which the way to do it is not by having him cheat to beat Rollins, but that's just my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. He had the curb stomp hit on the table, which then took Rhodes out for a little bit, and he sold it very well for this whole week. Can't wait to see what they do with that moving forward this Monday. And then, of course, the main event was Bianca Belair versus Asuka in a non-title matchup where we saw Becky Lynch interfere and actually attack both competitors. That's probably going to lead to some form of a triple threat match for the women's title at the next event. Now, let's move into the next show, which was SmackDown. Yeah, both WWE shows did not impress me all that much. SmackDown, of course, was built around the confrontation between the Usos and RK Bro, or I should say the Bloodline and RK Bro. And that, of course, was the main thing going in to the entire night. But the very first segment they had with RK Bro had Sami Zayn come out and basically challenge Matt Riddle, and Riddle and Zayn had a match that was really good to start the show. But again, it was just a precursor for what was to come later on in the show. And then during the night, we also saw other things take place, such as Ronda Rousey coming out and issuing her open challenge for the SmackDown Women's title, which was answered by, of all people, Raquel Rodriguez, which I'm kind of glad they're putting focal points on her. She deserves it. She's a great worker. And of course, I didn't expect her to beat Rousey, but it was a nice way to get her introduced into the main event picture with Rousey. Do I think she's going to be there long term right now? Probably not. But it was a good way to get her noticed as a top echelon star, and I'm all for that. Then we also saw Butch have a match with Kofi to hopefully cap off their feud where he picked up the win. And speaking of cap-offs, we saw Madcap Moss get beaten down by Happy Corbin, and his trophy was ruined by Happy Corbin. So that storyline is very similar to another storyline that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. We saw the women's tag team title match take place with Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey taking on one another, and that was a decent match as it was. It was what it was, and we saw the champions retain their titles. So it needed to be what it was, and it was okay for what it was. Nothing really special other than it was a women's tag title match. That led into the main event segment where we had the Bloodline and RK Bro have the confrontation and make it official. For SmackDown next week, the tag titles will be unified, and I have been a big proponent of this. I like it, and I can't wait to see what they do with this next week on SmackDown. Now, who got the runner-up spot this week? It was a back and forth, but honestly, it came down to just what have I been enjoying as a product more so. And honestly, the runner-up this week was AEW yet again. They had a pretty solid show though. They had the Wardlow MJF segment where they copied what they're doing with Cody Rhodes. Back when MJF was feuding with him, it's literally almost a copy and paste of what Wardlow has to go through to get his match. But it's also interesting because there's two similar storylines going on with MJF and Wardlow, and then Madcap Moss and Happy Corbin on SmackDown. So companies, y'all are kind of just doing the same thing, and you can kind of break away from that. And AEW might be the worst offender on that one, strictly just because they're also doing a rehash of their own angle from not too long ago with Cody. So that's just an opinion of mine, though. Still, overall, it wasn't terrible, and it's building towards a good match. I think they're doing great with Wardlow, as a matter of fact. They also had the FTW title on the line, where they saw Jungle Boy and Absolute Ricky Starks have a good match that ended in some controversy yet again, with Ricky Starks retaining the FTW title. So that was all right as a match as it was. I think this might be an angle that's going to eventually pay for Christian turning on the Jurassic Express, but we'll see where that goes. We also saw a confrontation between the Jericho Appreciation Society and Santana Ortiz and Eddie Kingston, and having backup in the form of the Blackpool Combat Club. This may lead to the next Blood and Guts, is where I think it's going to go. So I look forward to seeing how this ends up progressing as a story moving forward. And then, of course, we kicked off officially the Owen Hart Foundation Tournament, where we saw Dax and Adam Cole take on each other, I should say. And Adam Cole picked up the victory over Dax Hardwood. We saw on the women's side of things, Toni Storm pick up a victory over Jamie Hayter. And then the main event, which was the match of the week, in my opinion. And for anybody who was looking for like a traditional wrestling match where it was hold for hold, that's not what you were going to get, because that's not what these two characters have made themselves known for. And they gave you what they were known for and what you would expect from a match between these two. An all-out, just high spot after high spot with Darby Allin and Jeff Hardy. It was very entertaining. There was one spot where I, like everybody else that saw it, was like, oh my God, it's crazy. The swanton from Allin off the ladder through the chairs with Hardy, that was insane. But it had Hardy pick up an awesome win with a crucifix pin, which was, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but was assisted by the ladder. So I thought that was a pretty cool spot. Overall, AEW had a great show, but still, number one this week is Impact Wrestling. I, again, have made it no secret that I am a big fan of what they've been doing, and they continued their streak this week, starting off with Kenny King earning his spot in the X Division title match at Slammiversary when he defeated Bullet Club's Chris Bay. It just overall wasn't a good night at all for the Bullet Club, as then later on we saw Jay White and El Fantasma, which I really like that team, take on none other than Tomohiro Ishii and Josh Alexander, former opponents, now teammates, and they picked up a victory over the BC. Again, BC just wasn't their night, but that's okay. There's plenty of time left to come before Slammiversary. And then speaking of Slammiversary, the first Queen of the Mountain match was announced for the Knockouts Championship, which involves Deonna Purrazzo, Chelsea Green, the champion, of course, Tasha Steelz, Jordan Grace, and the returning Mia Yim. And it was a really great segment to introduce that as being a first in making history. That's leading into a six-man woman's tag, I should say. I said six-man, but I guess it's six-woman's tag next week. So I can't wait to see how that ends up going. But the whole purpose for this week's Impact was to build around the gauntlet for the gold. And it was a really fun match. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite spots was seeing Shark Boy come back and do his whole Stone Cold ripoff gimmick. It's very funny still. But at the end of the night, the man who won the gauntlet for the gold and is going on to Slammiversary to take on Josh Alexander is Violet by Design's Eric Young. I actually am really okay with this, and I think this would be a good matchup, a clash of old guard versus new guard, seeing as Eric Young has been there almost from the start. He, of course, went to WWE for a little bit, but he's always had that aura of TNA or Impact Original. And Josh Alexander is the flag bearer and franchise of Impact right now, so I really look forward to seeing what they do at Slammiversary for the title. Now, that was my choice for best wrestling show this week, and now let's talk about this week's Brothers Week, where we are talking about wrestlers that either I have known personally that are working the indie scene and I have met or something to that degree. This week's pick is going to be none other than the reigning WFC champion, Luke Langley. Luke is an awesome individual, a hard worker. He, like Sam Stackhouse, is just a road warrior that is willing to work anywhere and everywhere, that's willing to book him, and he gives it your all. He is all about high pace, high intensity inside that wrestling ring. Go check him out if you haven't before. You can find him on the social medias. You can go look up some matches online. It's Luke Langley, current WFC champion. Now, those were my picks for Brother of the Week as well as Best Wrestling Show. What did you think was the best wrestling show this week? Let me know in that comment section down below. Don't forget, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our channel and make sure you like the video as well. And then make sure your bell notification is on so that you're notified anytime we upload a new video to this channel. As always, I'm Travis Fowler Harkrider. It's been your pleasure, and I'll see you again next week.